I sat with my hands folded in my lap, watching 25 years of dedication crumble in front of my colleagues. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Bright Hollow Labs' downtown Phoenix office, casting long shadows across the polished table where my career was being dissected like a failed blueprint. "Nobody wants Grandma's designs anymore," Kenneth said with a smug chuckle, his voice resonating through the glass-walled conference room. "We need fresh blood on the innovation team, not outdated concepts from the 80s. Today, it seemed to matter. None of that. "My name is Eliza Freeman, and I am 56 years old, and I have been designing sustainable architecture since before it was trendy. I have dedicated more than 20 years of my life to this firm, designing innovative green buildings that struck a balance between environmental responsibility and functionality, winning awards, mentoring young architects, and helping to establish Bright Hollow Labs as a leader in sustainable design." "Your aesthetic has—" Kenneth hesitated, fumbling with his pricey watch, trying to find the perfect words. "Become dated. The market is looking for sleek, contemporary designs that appeal to younger audiences." This wasn't a discussion, it was an execution. The other partners nodded in agreement, their faces displaying a mix of relief that they weren't in my shoes and false sympathy. I could see that they had already made up their minds before I had even entered the room. Kenneth went on to say, "Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning off the innovation team," as he tossed a folder across the table in my direction. "We're restructuring to focus on more modern approaches to sustainable design." I was aware of the irony that they were relegating me to repairing old buildings while ignoring the very experience that had taught me how to design enduring, exquisite structures. "You'll be reassigned to our restoration division, working on historical preservation projects." As I sat quietly around this table, I reflected on all the late hours I had spent honing ideas, all the client meetings where I had pushed for sustainable materials when they were costly and unpopular, and all the new architects I had educated. "I understand," I murmured softly, sounding more composed than I actually was. "When does this change take place?" "Next Monday," said Kenneth, now paging through other documents. "Harrison will take over your ongoing projects. We'll make sure the clients know about the change." As I gathered my belongings and headed for the door, I noticed that my most recent project sketches, which were still pinned to the presentation board, showed designs for a cutting-edge, eco-friendly housing complex that integrated natural ventilation and solar technology. Kenneth had no idea that those dated ideas would soon prove him to be completely mistaken. Walking back to my office, I tried to process what had just happened. The hallways of Bright Hollow Labs felt different now, less like home, like a place where I was merely tolerated. I'd spent so many years here that I could navigate these corridors with my eyes closed, but now everything seemed foreign. I joined the firm straight out of graduate school, back when sustainable architecture was considered a niche specialty rather than an industry standard. My mentor, Patricia Holloway, had founded the company with the vision of creating buildings that worked in harmony with their environment. She'd retired 5 years ago, selling her shares to the current partnership, and with her went the soul of the company I'd helped build. Kenneth Morrison had been climbing the corporate ladder ever since, bringing with him a focus on profits over principles. He favored flashy designs that looked good in architectural magazines, but often sacrificed long-term sustainability for immediate visual impact. His idea of innovation was installing smart home technology in otherwise conventional buildings and calling them revolutionary. I thought about my daughter Claire, who lived in Seattle with her 2 kids, and had frequently asked me why I continued to work at a firm that seemed to undervalue my contributions. "Mom, you could start your own practice," she would say during our weekly video calls. "You have the experience and the reputation." However, Bright Hollow Labs had been my professional identity for so long that I couldn't imagine working anywhere else. As I arrived at my office, I saw the pictures of buildings I'd designed over the years, including the affordable housing project in Mesa that had become a model for other cities, the community center in Tucson that had won a state sustainability award, and the Tempe Elementary School that had cut its energy consumption by 60%. Each project represented not just a building, but a piece of my professional soul. My computer beeped with an email notification. It was from the Phoenix Green Housing Initiative, and it was marked as very important. 3 months prior, I had submitted my independent design proposal, working on it in my home studio on the weekends and evenings. The city had announced a competition for sustainable, affordable housing concepts, and I had chosen to enter under my own name instead of through the firm. The email was brief but promising. They wanted to set up a presentation meeting for the next week. My heart raced as I realized that, even though Kenneth was pushing me out, my own work might be opening a whole new door. I replied right away, confirming my availability, and then sat back in my chair with the first sincere smile of the day. The weekend was a haze of conflicting feelings, with me alternating between frustration over Kenneth's contemptuous behavior and eagerness for the imminent presentation with the city. On Saturday morning, I laid out my competition designs on my dining room table, going over each detail with new eyes. My idea was modular sustainability, with inhabitable housing units that could be modified to accommodate various family sizes, and lot configurations, passive solar heating, rainwater collection systems, and rooftop gardens that residents could use to grow their own food. The design was sleek and contemporary, but based on practical functionality, what Kenneth would likely refer to as grandma's designs, I knew it was just architecture. When Claire called for our weekly check-in on Sunday afternoon, she commented, "You sound different, Mom," following my explanation of my dismissal from the innovation team. "I was expecting you to be more upset." I confessed that I was unhappy as I walked around my home office, where I had spent many hours working on personal projects, but I was also feeling liberated for the first time in years, because I was working on something that was all mine. When she said, "Tell me about this city project," I could tell she was genuinely interested. Despite the firm's efforts to make me feel outdated, I was still excited about my job as I presented my house design plan, which could deliver inexpensive, sustainable dwellings while fostering a sense of community through shared green spaces and energy systems. Claire remarked, "Mom, this sounds amazing. When is your presentation?" Tuesday afternoon. I spent the entire weekend honing the proposal. The strange thing is that this design combines everything I've learned over the past 5 years. It's not outdated. Rather, it's evolved. I stopped and looked at the sketches scattered around my desk. Harrison, the young architect who would be taking over my projects, sent me an email on Monday morning, asking to meet to talk about the transfer. The meeting was professional but awkward. Harrison obviously felt uneasy about the situation, and it more difficult for him. He was talented, just inexperienced, and none of this was his fault. I agreed, but I thought it was ironic that someone half my age, with a fraction of my experience, was deemed more innovative simply because he preferred glass and steel over natural materials. He spread files on the conference table and remarked, "I've reviewed your current projects. Your work is really impressive. I'm hoping to continue producing work of the same caliber. You will, I reassured him. Just remember that sustainable design isn't about following trends. It's about creating buildings that will serve people well for decades. These buildings will be finished by someone else, but they were a reminder of my past, and I felt a strange feeling of closure as I turned over my project files. My future would be decided by the presentation on Tuesday. I got to the office early, on Tuesday morning, to finish organizing my workspace from the innovation team area. The building was quieter than usual, with most employees not showing up until 8 a.m. I'd always been an early riser, preferring the quiet before the day's chaos started. I was taking up the last of my personal belongings when Kenneth passed my old desk. Eliza, how is the changeover going? I'll be completely moved to the restoration department by this afternoon, I said smoothly, not glancing up from the box. I was filling in response to his question, which seemed more like an obligation than a sincere worry. Good, he continued, pausing. I hope you realize that this was a business choice, not a personal one. I glanced up at him at last. This man who had been methodically destroying everything Patricia Holloway had built over the past 5 years. I understand completely, Kenneth. The firm needs to stay competitive. He appeared pleased with my remark and proceeded to his corner office, saying that sometimes change is exactly what's required. He was unaware that I would be giving a presentation to the Phoenix Green Housing Initiative Committee in 3 hours, which may usher in a new phase of my career and make his idea of competitive seem incredibly limited. I told my assistant that I had a dentist appointment at 1 p.m., and since it was a 15-minute drive from Bright Hollow Labs to Phoenix City Hall, I used the time to go over my talking points one last time. My hands were more steady than I had anticipated, as if years of client presentations had prepared me for this. A city planner, a housing advocate, an environmental engineer, and a community representative were among the 5 members seated around a rectangular table in the key committee meeting room, which was smaller than I had expected. The introductions were led by Dr. Angela Rodriguez, the city's Director of Sustainable Development. Miss Freeman, Dr. Rodriguez started, we've impressed ourselves with your initial contribution. Your modular strategy for environmentally friendly housing tackles a number of the major issues Phoenix is currently facing. For you to elaborate on your idea. With a passion I hadn't felt in years, I spent the next half hour presenting my design, explaining how the integrated community gardens would offer social connection and food security, how the passive solar design would minimize energy costs for residents, and how the modular units could be manufactured off-site to reduce construction waste. I pointed to my technical drawings and remarked, this system's versatility is its beauty. As their family grows, a young couple may add modules to their 1-bedroom apartment. By cutting out portions, empty nesters could reduce their size and make room for other families. Leaning forward, the environmental engineer asked, how about upkeep expenses? These systems appear to be intricate. They're actually made to be simple, I said, adding that the rainwater and solar systems are based on tried-and-true technology with few moving components. Durability and ease of maintenance are factors in the selection of the building materials. Residents would experience a large reduction in utility expenses over a 20-year period. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, each one allowing I put into every aspect of the design. These weren't just pretty drawings. This was a comprehensive solution to urban housing challenges. Miss Freeman, Dr. Rodriguez said as the session concluded, we have 3 more presentations this week, but I can tell you that your proposal addresses our requirements exceptionally well. We'll be making our final decision by Friday and announcing the winner next Monday. As I drove back to Bright Hollow Labs, I felt a mixture of hope and nervous energy. Whether or not I won the competition, I'd reminded myself that my designs weren't dated. They were timeless, practical, and innovative in ways that mattered beyond aesthetic trends. The rest of the week crawled by at an agonizing pace. I threw myself into my new role in the restoration department, reviewing historical preservation guidelines and studying architectural drawings from the 1920s and 1930s. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Kenneth dismissed my work as dated, I was now officially responsible for maintaining buildings from nearly a century ago. Thursday afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Harrison knocked on my new office door, looking uncertain. "Eliza, do you have a minute? I'm running into some issues with the Scottsdale project." I gestured for him to sit down. The Scottsdale project had been my baby, a mixed-use development that combined residential units with retail space and office areas, all designed around a central courtyard with native desert landscaping. The client is asking for modifications to the ventilation system, Harrison continued. They want to add more mechanical cooling, but I'm not sure how that affects your sustainability calculations. I pulled out my original notes for the project. The natural ventilation system was designed to work with the building's orientation and the thermal mass of the adobe walls. If you add conventional air conditioning, you'll need to recalculate the energy load for the entire building. We spent the next hour going through the technical details. Harrison was bright and eager to learn, but he lacked the experience to understand how changing one element of a sustainable design could affect the entire system. As we worked, I realized how much institutional knowledge was walking out the door with my demotion. "You know," Harrison said as we finished, "I've been looking at your other projects. You have a very clever approach to sustainable design. I don't understand why—" He trailed off, obviously uncomfortable criticizing the partners. "Why I was moved off the innovation team," I finished for him. Sometimes experience is seen as a liability rather than an asset. Dr. Rodriguez wanted to set up a follow-up call for 2 p.m. The subject line read, "Phoenix Green Housing Initiative Next Steps." I tried not to read too much into it, but it sounded promising. The call lasted 10 minutes, but it was the most significant 10 minutes of my professional life. "Ms. Freeman, I'm pleased to inform you that the committee has chosen your modular, sustainable housing design as the winner of our competition. Your proposal scored highest in every category we evaluated: innovation, sustainability, cost-effectiveness, and community impact." I sat in stunned silence for a moment before managing to say, "Thank you. I'm honored and excited to move forward." At 10:00 a.m. on Monday, the official announcement will be made. Dr. Rodriguez went on, "We would like you to attend a news conference at City Hall so you may respond to inquiries regarding the design. This is a significant initiative for Phoenix. We're planning to build the first phase of 200 units within 18 months. After the call ended, I sat in my office processing what had just happened. In the span of 1 week, I'd gone from being dismissed as irrelevant to winning the most significant housing competition in the city's history. My dated aesthetic had just been selected to house thousands of Phoenix residents in innovative, sustainable homes. I thought about calling Claire immediately, but decided to wait until after the public announcement. There was something satisfying about keeping this victory private for a few more days, especially while Kenneth continued to restructure the innovation team around more contemporary approaches. Looking at my calendar, I realized that Monday's press conference would occur during the weekly staff meeting at Bright Hollow Labs. I wondered if anyone would be watching the local news. Monday morning arrived with unusual warmth for October in Phoenix. I'd spent the weekend preparing for the press conference, reviewing my design details, and anticipating questions from reporters. The weight of the moment was starting to sink in. This wasn't just a professional victory. It was validation of everything I'd spent my career working toward. I arrived at City Hall 30 minutes early, wanting time to compose myself before facing the cameras. Dr. Rodriguez met me in her office, along with Mayor Patricia Thompson and several other city officials. "Miss Freeman, before we begin, I want you to know how impressed we were with your presentation," Mayor Thompson said. "This housing initiative represents the future of sustainable urban development, and your design will serve as a model for other cities across the Southwest." The press conference was held in the main lobby of City Hall, with local television stations, newspaper reporters, and representatives from architectural publications in attendance. As I stood at the podium beside the mayor, I thought about all the late nights I'd spent working on this design in my home studio, never imagining it would lead to this moment. Today, we're proud to announce the winner of Phoenix's Green Housing Initiative, Mayor Thompson began. "After reviewing proposals from firms across the region, She turned to me and I took the stage to speak to the crowd. "This design represents 25 years of learning how to create buildings that serve both people and the environment." The questions from reporters were detailed and thoughtful. One from Architectural Digest wanted to know how the design addressed Phoenix's unique climate challenges, while another from the Arizona Republic wanted to know about construction timelines. With each response, I felt more confident. Miss Freeman, a reporter from Channel 12, asked, "I understand you're an architect with Bright Hollow Labs. What is your company's opinion of this choice?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. This was an independent submission. I developed this design on my own time, using my personal experience and vision for sustainable housing. As the press conference concluded, I noticed several familiar faces in the crowd. Word had apparently spread quickly through Phoenix's architectural community. I saw colleagues from other firms, former clients, and even a few current Bright Hollow Labs employees who had obviously left work to attend. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Mom, I just saw the news online. I'm very pleased with you." Her message was followed by a string of celebration emojis. The drive back to Bright Hollow Labs felt surreal. I'd just been announced as the winner of the city's most significant housing competition, but I still had to return to my desk in the restoration department and pretend this was just another Monday. As I walked through the office lobby, I could feel eyes following me. The news had clearly reached the firm. Janet, the receptionist, gave me a knowing smile and a thumbs up. Several junior architects stopped their conversations to congratulate me. I made it to my office without encountering Kenneth, but I knew that conversation was inevitable. My phone was already buzzing with calls from reporters wanting follow-up interviews, and my email inbox was filling with congratulatory messages from colleagues across the industry. By noon, it was clear that my dated aesthetic had just become the most talked-about architectural design in Phoenix. The irony was delicious, but I wasn't finished yet. Kenneth appeared in my office doorway at 1 p.m. His expression was a careful mask of professionalism that couldn't quite hide his frustration. "Eliza, congratulations on your competition win," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "Quite an achievement." He kept settling into the chair across from my desk. "Thank you," I said, not taking my eyes off the historical preservation documents I was looking over. "I'm pleased the city appreciated the design. I'm curious, when exactly did you develop this proposal? I don't recall seeing any modular housing concepts in your recent project portfolio." I put down my pen and looked him in the eye. The design process took around 6 months, mostly on the weekends and in the evenings. and I worked on it in my own time, in my home studio. Kenneth's jaw tensed a little. Bright Hollow Labs has been your professional home for 25 years, so I understand. And you didn't think to discuss this with the firm? I calmly replied. The competition guidelines were clear that submissions could come from individual architects or firms. I decided to enter as an individual. Kenneth pressed, but surely you understand the optics here? You're a Bright Hollow Labs employee winning a major city contract just days after being restructured within the firm. It could appear that we don't recognize talent. We announced the competition 4 months ago. The submission deadline was 3 months ago, and the judging process has been going on for weeks. None of this happened just days after anything, Kenneth said. Finally losing his cool, he got to his feet and said, "The partners and I need to talk about how to handle this situation. The media is already demanding statements regarding our involvement in the project." I went back to my papers and said, "I'll save you the trouble. I'll be answering all media questions myself." More importantly, the story was picked up by Architectural Review, the most prestigious publication in the industry, which published an online article titled Innovation from Experience: How 25 Years of Practice Led to Award-Winning Design, which included interviews with sustainable design experts praising the approach and a detailed analysis of my modular housing concept. By Tuesday morning, the story had gained more momentum than anyone had anticipated. The Phoenix Business Journal ran a front-page feature titled, "Local Architects' Independent Design Wins City Housing Competition," with a sidebar article analyzing the growing trend of sustainable architecture in the Southwest. Harrison, who had been ordered to gather all the files pertaining to my past assignments for the firm, informed me that Kenneth had scheduled an emergency partners meeting for Tuesday afternoon. He looked uncomfortable as he told me, "They want to see everything you worked on for the past 2 years. Kenneth specifically mentioned looking through your project documentation for any connection to the winning design. And I felt sorry for them, because they were trying to figure out how they could take some of the credit for my success without realizing that this design was a totally different philosophy than anything Bright Hollow Labs had pursued under Kenneth's direction." The phone call I had been anticipating arrived on Wednesday, and it was Kenneth, his voice strained with artificial excitement. "We're ready to offer you a return to the innovation team as the lead sustainable design architect, and we'd like to talk about how Bright Hollow Labs could be the implementing firm for your housing project. Eliza, the partners have been talking about your recent success, and we'd like to offer a solution. The choice that works for everyone." I paused for a few seconds before answering. He took a deep breath over the phone. "Thanks for the offer, Kenneth, but I'm pretty happy with my current position. As for the implementation, I'll be working directly with the city's selected construction partners. Eliza, you must be able to see how both parties stand to gain from this." I interrupted gently. "The decision is final. The firm's resources, our established relationships with contractors, the city has already chosen their preferred partners." I turned in my letter of resignation to Bright Hollow Labs on Thursday morning. It was time for me to open my own practice after 25 years. The phone hadn't stopped ringing since Monday's announcement, but the Phoenix Housing Project would be my first big client. Architects from all across the nation called to inquire about joint ventures or licensing arrangements for my modular design idea. Kenneth showed up at my office while I was packing my personal items in an attempt to persuade me to change my mind one last time. "Eliza, this is a mistake." I glanced around the office I was leaving behind, and then at the man who attempted to make me feel outdated. "Kenneth, you told me nobody wanted Grandma's designs anymore. You're throwing away decades of stability for what might be a short-term success. You were mistaken about what people genuinely desire, it turns out. I asked Claire, who had flown down from Seattle for the weekend to help me set up my new home office, what I was planning to do. I'm going to design buildings that last, I replied, not just structurally, but in terms of their value to the communities they serve. As we positioned my drafting table by the large window overlooking the desert landscape, I will demonstrate that wisdom and experience are timeless and indispensable. 6 months later, the first phase of the Phoenix Green Housing Initiative began construction, and Mayor Thompson invited me to witness the ceremony. There, I saw construction workers lay the groundwork for homes that would house families for generations to come, and the design that Kenneth had written off as outdated was now being studied by urban planners from all over the world. As I stood there, witnessing my vision come to life, I realized that sometimes the sweetest retaliation isn't proving your critics wrong, but proving that you were correct all along. My path from fired employee to independent architect taught me that true innovation doesn't come from following trends, but rather from comprehending timeless principles and applying them to modern problems.